When a surface warship with a full load displacement exceeding 10,000 tons is equipped with core armaments roughly equivalent to those of a standard 4,000-ton frigate, what kind of naval strategic logic does this seemingly baffling design combination actually reflect? This question has been repeatedly raised among military enthusiasts worldwide, especially after the Chinese Navy's Type 055 destroyer and similar designs continually redefine perceptions of firepower density in large surface vessels. The European 10,000-ton ships, often jokingly referred to as luxury military yachts, have seemingly become cautionary tales in naval design. However, if we set aside our singular fixation on firepower and examine the matter from a broader perspective of equipment systems and national strategy, the existence of such vessels, and even the possibility that a naval power might choose a similar path in the future, carries implications far richer than the mere number of vertical launch cells for ship-borne missiles. For a long time, certain Western nations have exhibited a preference in the design of large surface vessels that has left Eastern military observers rather perplexed. Take Australia's Hunter-class frigates, for example. While their planned full-load displacement exceeds 10,000 tons, their primary air defense armament consists of only a 48-cell vertical launch system, and their anti-surface and anti-submarine capabilities are hardly outstanding. Germany's F-126 frigate takes this approach to the extreme, with a hull displacement exceeding 10,000 tons. Its armament level and the complexity of its integrated shipboard electronic systems fall short of those found on many nations' 6,000-ton destroyers. Such designs have naturally drawn significant criticism, particularly from commentators accustomed to measuring a warship's value by hard metrics such as firepower density, missile load, and radar detection range. In their view, this amounts to a massive waste of precious tonnage. The extra thousands of tons of displacement were not converted into more missiles or used to build more powerful phased array radars, but were instead allocated to non-combat areas such as improving crew living conditions, adding recreational facilities, and carrying more fuel to extend endurance and range. Behind this design philosophy lies a profound divergence in the strategic positioning of different nations' navies. Currently, on a global scale, only China and the United States are actively building their navies with the core capabilities of decisive battles for blue water fleets and high-intensity, all-domain warfare. The core design logic of the mainstay destroyers and frigates in both navies, whether China's Type 055 and Type 052D or the US Arleigh class, is to allocate as much hull space and weight as possible within a given tonnage to weapons systems, shipboard electrical systems, and the supporting power and cooling systems. This design philosophy seeks to maximize the combat effectiveness of individual ships, ensuring that every main combat vessel can independently counter high-intensity threats in complex battlefield environments. While crew comfort and endurance are certainly important, they are often prioritized lower when they conflict with combat effectiveness metrics. This choice stems from the fact that both nations must undertake global or regional high-intensity maritime presence and deterrence missions, requiring their fleets to be constantly prepared to face evenly matched adversaries. In contrast, the European 10,000-ton class ships, often labeled as luxury yachts, have entirely different design philosophies and operational scenarios. The maritime security environments in these nations are relatively benign. Their navy's primary missions do not involve engaging in decisive fleet battles with opponents of comparable size on the high seas, but rather focus on participating in joint operations under the NATO framework, conducting maritime patrols and surveillance in low-threat areas, carrying out humanitarian assistance and disaster response, and demonstrating a presence in key shipping lanes to maintain the stability of maritime transport routes. Such missions are characterized by long durations, with single deployments often lasting several months, but involve a low level of anticipated threat. In this context, the long-term physical and mental well-being of the crew becomes a critical factor in mission success. Comfortable living quarters, ample recreational facilities, and greater self-sufficiency ensure that crew members can maintain good morale and combat readiness during sea deployments lasting up to 6 months. At the same time, to address potential contingencies during overseas deployments, these vessels typically retain basic capabilities in area air defense, anti-submarine warfare, and anti-surface warfare. While they do not aim for top-tier performance, these capabilities are sufficient to handle low to medium-intensity conflicts. Therefore, judging this type of support vessel by the standards applied to combat-oriented warships is, in essence, a misplaced comparison. The former is a sword designed for high-intensity combat, while the latter is a sentinel intended for long-term patrol duties. With this in mind, let us revisit that hypothetical scenario. If the Chinese Navy were to begin constructing such 10,000-ton class, large-scale surface platforms with relatively restrained firepower in the future, the strategic implications behind this move would be highly intriguing. For any rapidly expanding blue water navy, the classification and division of labor among its vessels is an inevitable sign of its maturation. When a navy is still facing imminent external pressure and needs to build hard power capable of countering a strong adversary within a short time frame using limited resources, every ton of displacement is allocated with extreme care, pursuing the utmost in firepower and detection capabilities. At this stage, all large surface vessels will evolve toward high integration and high firepower density, as each ship could be a key piece in future high-intensity conflicts. However, when this navy begins to have the capacity and the need to build vessels with lower firepower density, but exceptional blue water operational capabilities, this typically signifies two things. First, its core fleet has already achieved hard power dominance over potential adversaries, eliminating the need for every large vessel to be on standby for high-intensity confrontations. Second, its maritime strategy has shifted from pure confrontation and expansion to the more complex tasks of maintenance and presence, that is, the need to safeguard global interests in order through long-term, stable, low-intensity maritime deployments. This shift is, in fact, one the U.S. Navy experienced during the latter stages of the Cold War. After the United States established its undisputed global maritime hegemony, its fleet composition came to include a large number of specialized vessels dedicated to anti-submarine warfare, mine countermeasures, patrols, command and control, and other support functions. Although the designs of some models were overly radical, the core concept, dedicating a portion of the fleet to low-intensity, high-endurance missions, thereby freeing up Aegis destroyers to focus on air defense and decisive combat, holds strategic logic. Similarly, if a navy begins to mass-produce large platforms with relatively restrained armament, but exceptional long-range endurance and self-sufficiency, it would clearly indicate that the strategic focus of its main fleet has shifted forward. Those heavily armed destroyers will increasingly serve as a deterrent force in key regions, while these 10,000-ton class large frigates will become the backbone of routine presence, long-term patrols, and responses to non-traditional security threats along global maritime transport routes. The deeper implication behind this vision is that building such vessels inherently signifies that it is no longer necessary to design every large ship as a node for high-intensity confrontation. The era of extreme external maritime pressure, requiring the exhaustion of resources to amass firepower, may have passed. Adopting a certain victor's posture, developing large support vessels that are more economical, prioritize crew welfare, and are better suited for long-term deployment, in addition to possessing a decisive strike force, reflects a shift in mindset for a navy transitioning from a follower to a leader. It is no longer focused solely on projecting firepower with the shortest time and highest density, but has begun to consider how to project maritime influence to every corner of the globe in a more sustainable and humane manner, and to maintain that presence over the long term. Of course, this does not mean the pursuit of firepower will cease. In any era, battle-ready warships remain the backbone of a powerful navy, but when a navy's fleet begins to include 10,000-ton class large support vessels, which may seem like a waste of tonnage, it precisely indicates that its backbone is already strong enough to free up resources to build a more robust and resilient naval force. From being mocked by outsiders for imitating Western design styles to proactively incorporating this concept of support vessels into its own fleet, this subtle shift may, more clearly than the launch of any new warship, outline the true contours of the evolving maritime power landscape. When a warship's mission expands from merely destroying the enemy to sustaining a long-term presence, protecting national interests, and maintaining order, every figure on the tonnage allocation chart takes on a new significance that transcends the mere count of gun barrels.